This is Professor Cruz. Our topic this week is religion. Religion is another important element of our culture that people value. Religion can be defined as a more or less structured set of beliefs and practices through which people seek mental and physical harmony with the powers of the universe. The rituals of religion mark the events of our lives: births, marriage, having children, and death, the events that are observed and celebrated. According to the Pew Research Center, which completed a comprehensive study of the global religious landscape in 2010, more than 80% of the world's people identify with a religious group. As you consider history and cultural events, you will note that religion is and has been a contributor to war, political strife, persecution, and mass movements of human population. Geographers are concerned with the distribution of the world's religions because religion is an important element of culture, because of its potential for religious conflict, and the different ways that religions use space. So, some of the questions for consideration for this week: how do we classify religions? Where are religions distributed? Why do religions have different distributions? And how does religion shape the cultural landscape? We will start with the discussion about religion in the United States. So, according to the information in your readings, 22% of the North American population is Catholic, 18% Protestant, 28% are part of other Christian groups, 25% are non-religious, 2% are Muslim, and 2% are Jewish. This map shows data on religious adherence for the United States by county in 2010. But be careful because it only shows the groups with the largest number of adherents in each county. So it's showing the dominant religious group in each county. The Association of Statisticians of American Religious Bodies conducted the research that contributed to this map. Religious groups were invited to participate, but remember that there is no mandatory census or survey that collects data on religion in the United States. This map represents 236 groups that participated. The reported data is from 344,894 congregations which contain over 150 million adherents. So clearly doesn't contain the whole population of the United States. So again, what you see here are the largest religious groups in each county. You see a concentration in red counties, which represent the Southern Baptist Convention. The Baptists dominate many of the counties in the south and the southern part of the United States. You see a concentration of blue counties in the southwest, west, and northeast, which represents Catholics. So in other parts of the country, the Catholic religion is dominant. And two others that you see in the mountain states, those are the Latter-day Saints or Mormons. So in the gray areas of the mountain states, such as Idaho and Utah and part of Nevada, and the western part of Wyoming, where those groups are dominant. And then also you see Lutherans in the northern part of the Midwest. And also you see Methodists in the green. While Christianity dominates the United States and North America, there are some non-Christian groups that reside in the United States. This map shows the largest non-Christian groups in the United States by states. And Islam is the largest non-Christian group in about 20 American states, and the Islam is represented with the green color, and those are mostly in the South and the Midwest. Buddhist is the largest non-Christian group in the mountain and western states, and the Jewish population, which is represented in pink, dominates in the Northeast and a few other states in the United States. While religion is important in the United States, one of the tenets of the United States is freedom of religion. Think about how we view religion and how religion is represented in the cultural landscape. There are several ways that geographers classify religions. One way to classify religions is based on whether they are open or closed. Universalizing religions are open. They attempt to be global by appealing to a variety of people regardless of location or culture. They are open to anyone who is willing to meet the requirements to join. Universalizing religions also are called proselytic because they proselytize. They openly convert people who may be considered non-believers. They're trying to convert you to join. 58% of the world's population practices a universalizing religion, and the three largest are Christianity with 2.1 billion adherents, Islam, and Buddhists. So there are about 1.5 billion Muslims and 376 million Buddhists. Buddhist number may be underrepresented because some Buddhists live in China. The tradition of communism in China led people to underreport their religion, as the official doctrine of communism is atheism or non-religious. So ethnic religions appeal to local group, and they are often practiced by people living in one area or belonging to one ethnic group. So Hinduism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Judaism are examples of ethnic religions. The largest ethnic religion by far is Hinduism, with approximately 900 million people. So it would be the third largest religious group after Christianity and Islam. But the people who practice Hinduism may practice widely different beliefs based on where they live in their local region. So it's very diverse practices based on people living in one town or region. The term itself derives from the Indus River. So go back and find the Indus River on your map. The word Hindu was used in various groups, including Persians, Greeks, and Arabs, to refer to groups living east or beyond the Indus River. So most people who are Hindu either live in South Asia or trace their ancestry to South Asia. There are other groups which also may be ethnic that practice traditional or animist beliefs. Other ways that geographers and others may classify religions are by how many gods a group believes in. So monotheistic religions believe in one God. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are examples of monotheistic religions. Polytheistic religions believe in many gods. So examples are Hinduism and Voodoo. And animists worship elements from nature. And Shinto, practiced in Japan, is an example of an animist religion. Now, this is a map that you've seen before, and it shows the distribution of religions in the world. And just to give you some examples, you can see in the key and that it's separated by universalizing religions, and then by under universalizing that includes Christian, Islam, and others, and then ethnic religions. One of the areas that you see in the United States and the other Americas is the yellow color. The yellow represents Roman Catholics, and you see that this color is dominant in the Americas, in Central Africa, and in Europe. And in the Americas, Roman Catholics are dominant in South America, and then you see that influence in the United States represented on the western part of the United States and also in the Northeast. and the Northeast somewhat because those from Ireland who moved to the United States and practiced Catholicism lived largely in the Northeast or originally lived there. So the other part of the United States is Protestant. Make sure when you look at this map, you also look at the pie charts. While the broad colors show the dominant religions, the pie charts show the regional breakdown. So you see that in Latin America, it shows 84% being Catholic, but in North America, it shows just 22% being Catholic, and actually a large portion being non-religious, which is represented in blue. Islam is prominent in northern, southern, and southwestern Asia. And you see that Protestants adherents are prominent in Northern America, Northern Europe, Southern Africa, and Australia. So take some time to look at this map and understand the distribution of religions globally. Now let's spend some time looking at this pie chart, which also shows the distribution of religions. First, notice that the pie chart is divided into 3 groups, and so you look at the dark black lines. So you have the universalizing religions, and remember that most of the population, or a greatest portion, is represented by those in universalizing religions. And then you have the ethnic religions. So we're working counterclockwise. Universal religions, ethnic religions, and then the third group is other, and that includes other religions as well as those that say they are not religious. So again, based on this chart, the largest single group, because it breaks down some of the Protestant religions, is Roman Catholic, but then you have Protestant, Orthodox, other Christians. So Christianity is broken out into several groups: Roman Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and other Christians. Then you have Islam broken out by Sunni and Shiite and other Islam, and then Buddhism. So those were the 3 largest universalizing religions: Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. And then you have Hinduism, and then Chinese ethnic, African ethnic. So you can see here that you see that the universalizing religions are dominant, but non-religious actually is the largest particular group represented on this graphic. So every graphic depends on how you decide to break out the groups. This third graph just takes the largest major religious groups. So it goes back to Christianity, Islam or Muslims, unaffiliated Hindus, Buddhists, folk religions, other religions. And you see that only 0.2% of the population is Jewish. This graph is based on data from the Pew Research Center study that shows that nearly 3/4 of the world's people live in countries in which their religious group makes up the majority of the population. So, and by religious group, we're not talking about denominations or sects. We're just talking about the largest religious groups. So Hindus, Christians, Muslims, and unaffiliated tend to live in places where they are the majority of the population. So when you think about why we're showing this graph, because you want to think about conflict. Where does conflict occur? Where there are possibly majorities or minorities fighting against the majority. And in this case, we're looking at it from a religious perspective. Hindus and Christians live in countries where they are the majority. 70% of Hindus live in world's 3 Hindu majority countries, including India, Mauritius, and Nepal. Nearly 90% of Christians are found in the world's 157 majority countries, and Muslims and unaffiliated people also live in countries where they are predominant. They are a predominant group. The religiously unaffiliated make up the majority of the population of 6 countries, which China is the largest. The others are the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hong Kong, Japan, and North Korea. This chart shows that some religions have much younger populations on average than other groups, and this is somewhat attributable to the geographic distribution of religious groups. Those with the large shares in the fast-growing developing countries tend to have younger populations. So remember that the developing countries are growing the fastest. They have the younger population, and that means their populations are likely to grow in the future. So Muslims have the lowest median age at 23, and that population is one of the fastest growing religious groups of Muslims. Hindus are next, then Christians, other religions, folk religions, and the oldest group is actually the Jewish population. So now we're going to talk about the origins and diffusions of the 3 major universalizing religions: Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. Universalizing religions have somewhat precise places of origin, often based on events in the life of an influential man. Ethnic religions are usually not tied to a historical individual, and they often have unclear or unknown origins. So before we get started, I just want to say that Judaism has been identified as the oldest religious tradition, dating back 4,000 years, and Judaism is the foundation for which Christianity and Islam formed. So specifically, we're going to look at the hearth of Buddhism, which originated about 2,500 years ago in the experiences and teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, who was transformed into the Buddha. Siddhartha grew up in present-day Nepal and spent his life preaching his view across India. Different branches formed over competing interpretations of the teaching of the Buddha. And so while there are many different branches, the origin is shown to be, again, remember, east of the Indus River, and the spread of Buddhism went a little bit to the northwest, but mostly to the east and southeast part of Asia. Christianity originated about 2,000 years ago with the teachings of Jesus, who was born in the city of Bethlehem in present-day Israel, and he was raised as a Jew. Christianity began to diffuse from Palestine through Europe during the time of the Roman Empire and continued after the empire's collapse. Paul of Tarsus, a disciple of Jesus, traveled extensively through the Roman Empire as a missionary. Christian branches formed over the differences of which set of doctrines to adhere to. Roman Catholics accept the teachings of the Bible as well as the interpretation of those teachings by the church hierarchy headed by the Pope. Orthodox Christians have rejected the doctrines that the Roman Catholic Church has added since the 8th century. Protestants believe that individuals have the primary responsibility for achieving personal salvation through direct communication with God. So that's why Protestants have separated from the Roman Catholics. So Islam originated about 1,500 years ago through the Prophet Muhammad, who was born in the city of Mecca in present-day Saudi Arabia. At age 40, Muhammad received his first revelation from God. The Quran is the record of God's words as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. By Muhammad's death at age 63, the armies of Islam controlled most of present-day Saudi Arabia. The 2 branches of Islam formed over a disagreement of which person had a more rightful claim to the succession of leadership from Muhammad. Asia is home to the hearth for Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. Followers transmitted the messages preached in the hearths to people elsewhere. Each of the three main universalizing religions has a distinct diffusion pattern. Buddhism's hearth is in present-day Nepal and northern India. Christianity's is in present-day Israel, and Islam's is in present-day Saudi Arabia. Buddhism diffused primarily east toward East Asia and Southeast Asia, Christianity toward Europe, and Islam west toward northern Africa and east toward southwestern Asia. Christianity originated in the eastern Mediterranean and spread by relocation diffusion through Christian missionaries. The most notable missionary, again, was Paul of Tarsus, who traveled extensively through the Roman Empire. Many people at that time practiced pagan or polytheistic religions. Christianity later spread by hierarchical diffusion through military conquests and the conversion of rulers. Roman emperors Constantine and Theodosius were instrumental in spreading Christianity in Europe and areas near the Mediterranean Sea. Migration and missionary activities continued to diffuse Christianity all over the world. Through permanent resettlement of Europeans, Christianity became the dominant religion of the Americas, Australia, and New Zealand, and some are predominantly Catholic, while others are predominantly Protestant. And then Christianity has further diffused to Africa, where it is now the most widely practiced religion, although perhaps that is just in the reporting mechanism. The diffusion of Islam. So within a century of Muhammad's death, Muslim armies conquered areas in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Some of the territory that was conquered by the Islamic armies was eventually lost, and some of the areas started practicing different religions. As was the case with Christianity, Islam diffused well beyond its hearth. Indonesia, which is not shown on this map, which is the world's fourth most populous country, is predominantly Muslim because Islam spread as Arab traders brought the religion there in the 13th century. So trading helped spread the religion. Islam diffused rapidly from its point of origin in present-day Saudi Arabia. Within 200 years, Muslims controlled much of Southwest Asia and North Africa and Southwestern Europe. Subsequently, Islam became the predominant religion as far east as Indonesia. And now Buddhism. Buddhism also diffused through missionaries, but diffused relatively slowly from its origin in northeastern India and Nepal. The person who was most responsible for the diffusion of Buddhism was Emperor Asoka, who facilitated diffusion through the Magadhan Empire, and that's in 273-232 BC. The Magadhan Empire controlled a large area of South Asia between the 6th BC and 8th century in the Common Era, and Asoka sent missionaries to territories neighboring the empire. Buddhism was introduced to China from the trade routes and in the 1st century, and it later diffused to other countries in East Asia, although it lost some of its original base of support in India. Some people now are adopting elements of Buddhism and mixing their religion with Buddhism with the religion of birth around the world. And that's why on that map that we saw at the beginning of this presentation, you see the Buddhism spreading into North America. Christian churches were traditionally constructed to be the tallest building in the town. Churches represented holy structures for many Christian branches and are built because of the importance given to attendance at the services held in the churches. When the location for the National Cathedral in Washington was secured, the location on Mount St. Alban was considered the most commanding spot in the entire Washington area. Mormon communities also have the local temple in the middle of town. The one pictured here on this slide is in Provo, Utah. Muslim mosques are not considered sacred in Islam, but instead are important gathering places for worship. Buddhist pagodas, which is featured here in the red, contain the relics of Buddha's body or clothing. Pagodas are typically tall, many-sided towers arranged in series of tiers, balconies, and slanting roofs. They are not designed for congregational worship. And religions can also be seen in the way some societies organizing their cities. In the Spanish Catholic settlements of Middle and South America, the main square nearly always has a large church. So think about that image on the cultural landscape. Another way religions appear on the cultural landscape is through the use of toponyms, or remember, place names. Place names near Quebec's boundaries with Ontario and the United States show the importance of impact of religion on the landscape here. In Quebec, a province with a predominantly Roman Catholic population, a large number of settlements are named for saints, where relatively few religious toponyms are found in the predominantly Protestant Ontario, New York, and Vermont. So you see this map has Quebec, which is largely Roman Catholic, and then Ontario has fewer religious place names, and then you also see neighboring Vermont and New York, which have fewer place names. You see religious spaces in public places, such as the prayer and reflection room on a university campus, which the University of the District of Columbia has one. Our landscape is also filled with cemeteries. Climate, topography, and religious doctrine combine to create differences in practices to shelter the dead. Christians, Muslims, and Jews all practice burial in dedicated cemeteries. Cemeteries were typically the only public open space in congested urban places prior to the 19th century, when more parks were constructed. In New Orleans, which is presented here, the above-ground cemeteries are often referred to as cities of the dead. They are above ground because the water table is very high, as much of New Orleans is below sea level. So they are represented in the cultural landscape differently. Our questions for consideration. Which religions dominate the world map and the world news? How is religion represented in the cultural landscape in your neighborhood? So this week we had a very brief introduction to religions. I find that most students are interested in religion because there are so many religions and we tend to know little about other religions and maybe even about our own. So we did not go into depth on specific religions, denominations, branches, and sects. As you interact in the landscape, observe how religious symbols, buildings, and other religious elements are presented in your cultural landscape.